Hey friends, hey friends, hey friends. This is Rose AJ with the Carnivore Connection, where you guys already know, heartfelt and soulful conversations take place. Y'all, before we get started with my fabulous guest today, her name is Megan and she's from England. Before we get started with her story, I have two announcements. So on September the 14th, I will be hosting a meet up, MEAT up here in Tacoma on Point Reston. We're going to do a 5K walk, which starts at 10 o'clock in the morning. You can be any age for that, right? And bring your friends because it's amazing what kind of conversations evolve out of meeting somebody that has a different way of life or that it's a different age. So you don't have to be 50 or older to join me on this. So that'll happen. We'll walk around Point Reston, and then at 11:15 we'll go over to Jewel Cafe where we can share a beverage together, or if you guys are eating or whatever. So it's a cafe. I'll be drinking black tea because I have given up coffee. This is like day 24, 25 or something like that. So I'll be drinking black tea. So, and then also September the 9th through November the 25th, I will be hosting a December the 9th through the 25th at 6 p.m. on Monday nights, Pacific Standard Time, 6 p.m. I will be hosting a beta test group for women that are 50 years old and older, a coaching group. So, like Megan is a coach, and I am a coach as well. And I've done coaching in all aspects. But this past January, I drew the line in the sand and just committed my resources and time and energy to carnivore. And that relieved me of having the thought that I could serve all the people, right? So it's really refined right now. So if you want to join in on that, it'll be in the notes, and it's $45 for the 12 weeks. And then during the month of December, I'll take everything that I've gathered and all the feedback, and then I will roll out a monthly program starting in January 2025. So jump in on this beta test group because you matter, right? You matter, I matter, and the next person matter who doesn't know that they're a carnivore in the making. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. I'm going to turn this over to Megan. And as I had shared with her, I'm using a new microphone, so I'm not really able to mute myself the way I had in the past. So, and we are on time constraints today. So I'm just going to let Megan do her thing and explain who she is, where she's at, her health journey, and then we'll go from there. All right, love, you go ahead and take it over, Miss Megan.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful introduction. And it's really great to be here with you guys. And so you're right, Rose, is that I do live in England. As you can tell from my very non-British accent, I'm not from here originally. My husband and I and both our sons are actually Canadian, but we've lived in the UK now for 15 years. And we're lucky. We're in a part of England where we don't get a whole lot of rain. The weather's actually really pretty nice. It's been really warm these last few weeks. And when people ask me, well, don't you miss living in Canada? Mosquitoes, black flies? No, I don't. Just to answer that question, no, I really don't. And the winters were the worst. We get very little snow and they're super mild here. I spent enough of my life growing up in blizzard conditions. So that would be a negatory. So this is home, although one of my children has moved back to Canada now, but it's a great place to visit, but England is certainly home now. So as far as that, I always find that an interesting question to try to answer of how did the journey start? And I think God puts us on a journey from the very beginning of life. And I won't go all the way back that far. That's 51 and almost 52 years worth of life. So that would take me a while. But as far as my journey on being carnivore and trying to get healthy, that probably started March of 2014. It was a week before Mother's Day, which is in March over here. And I was getting stuff out of the dryer. I twisted wrong. One of my lower lumbar discs bulged out, prolapsed. And I was bent in half like this. It was like a Barbie doll stuck in the folded position, and I could not stand up. I was in horrible pain. But I thought, oh, it's my sciatica acting up. Fine, I'll take some pain relief. I'll be fine in a few days. And of course, The days became weeks, which became months, and the pain didn't get any better, and it kept getting worse. And I finally got in to see the doctor. He referred me for an MRI, who said, well, actually, no, you have a disc bulge. To which I asked, so what do I do? And the answer I got at that point was, well, there's nothing you can do. Okay, so what's next? And at that time, they only thought it was a disc bulge, which little ones happen quite frequently. It's one of those things where I ask, well, what caused it? Well, you've had kids, so your pelvis has shifted position, and you're over 40, and you've had previous injuries. You've fallen lots. As you know, I fell all the time every winter. I don't think you get through a winter with ice and snow without slipping and falling at least once. So they basically didn't know exactly why it happened, just that I met all of the requirements of higher risk of it happening. So all they said to me was, well, rest up, don't do any too much repetitive motion, don't lift anything heavy, take your paracetamol / Tylenol pain relief, and if it doesn't get better, come back. And that was all they could describe. And in a sense, I was lucky because I wasn't paralyzed, nothing was broken. But because of that, they didn't want to do anything else other than just the whole wait and see game. There's, which I get, it's a high risk. If they had to perform surgery, there's a greater risk that it would have caused more damage than it would have fixed. So that's fine. Well, by September, it wasn't just, and I could feel where it had pushed out in my back. I could feel the lump. But it wasn't just that. I was noticing I was having this weird tingling pain in my neck, in my shoulders, in my lower back, in my legs, in my arms, and it was getting worse consistently. And I went back and I saw the orthopedic surgeon. And I said, right, here's what's happening. Is this a problem? He says, well, it's nothing to do with your back. We need to send you to a specialist. We think you might have fibromyalgia, which is just widespread soft tissue pain all over the body. Okay. Never heard of it before. Fine. So I had what I like to call frequent flyer miles for the hospital because I was sent up for so many blood tests so many times. Oh, it might be lupus. No, it's not lupus. It might be arthritis. Nope, it's not arthritis. Okay, so what is it? Well, we don't know what it is, but it's not that. Could you help me out here? Like I'd like to know what it is so I know what I need to do. And it took them a year of consistent observation and blood work and testing and symptomology and ruling out every other possible condition under the sun to say, yeah, you've got fibromyalgia on top of your back injury. Oh, so what do I do for that? Well, there is nothing you can really do because it affects everybody differently. Some people respond well to pain medication. Some do well with massage or hydrotherapy. Some people do well with a little exercise. Some people do well with no exercise. So I'm somebody where it's like, tell me what's wrong. Show me how to fix it. Give me the medication. Give me the plan and I'll do it, whatever it is. And it was super frustrating because they didn't have a plan. They didn't know what to suggest to me. So I started on pain medication, which increased very soon and quite a bit over a short period of time. So I was taking gabapentin, maximum dosage every day. They put me on antidepressants because I was becoming far more depressed because I couldn't get around, and it still wasn't getting better.
Before you go on, let me ask you this, Miss Meghan. So you said your symptoms, your problems started in 2014.
Yes.
During all this time, the first year where they were constantly sending you for tests, there was no exact answers, and you being a willing patient, if you just knew where did this come from, you would follow their directions as best you could.
Exactly.
My question to you, were you doing any research on your own? Were you gathering information, data to take to the doctors or trying to figure out what's going on with your health yourself, through Google, encyclopedias, or anything of that kind?
I definitely was. I went to WebMD just to check through my symptoms. I had a rheumatologist actually say to me, she said, "Look, I suspect it's fibromyalgia, and that's what I'm going to suggest to your GP, because it's a diagnosis by process of elimination." So throughout that time, I was looking up, what is fibromyalgia? What are the symptoms? What causes it? And they don't really know the exact cause. And so I had all this information, I printed out this massive packet of information. I thought, oh, I've got all the details. My GP is going to love me. Didn't want to hear it. Didn't want to hear. They were happy to hear when they saw through the notes from the rheumatologist saying, no, we suspect fibromyalgia. This is what you should be diagnosing. That they listened to, thankfully. But every time I said, right, I've got all this pain and all these key pressure points, I was like the poster perfect example of fibromyalgia, because I had all the soft tissue points that are typical. I had every single one of them that was a sore point. Because I also had the back injury, I couldn't walk properly. So my back continued to get sore. I was eventually, within that year, I started having to use crutches around the house. The pain continued to get worse in spite of the gabapentin. So, and because I already had been diagnosed with IBS in 2007, I knew I couldn't take any of the morphine or opioids because it would just completely ruin my gut. So they said, right, we'll give you gabapentin. That should help. It's supposed to be a nerve blocker. Limited effect. They had me on codeine, with the equivalent of codeine with Tylenol, maximum dosage, 2 tablets, maximum dosage, 4 times a day. I took ibuprofen as well when I needed it, which was almost every day. And the depression that I'd struggled with for quite a while, of course, got even worse, because here I was having a very, very difficult time with movement, being hardly able to get off the sofa, get out of bed, starting to deal with things like bladder incontinence, and just losing a zest for life. And so they put me in antidepressants as well to try to help sort of bring things down. And I've always been an extremely anxious person since I was a child, but it became a crippling form of anxiety, especially during this phase. So all of this is going on. And, my kids were now entering the teenage years, which is always, they've gotten through it. They're in their 20s now, completely different, wonderful young men, but their teens were, that was God testing me. I'm telling you, it absolutely was. I'm like, okay, it's going to get better. I don't know how yet, God, but it's got to get better. And eventually it did. But so there was all that going on, and I was still trying to work full time. My brain fog was absolutely horrific. By mid 2015, I couldn't drive any longer. I had to give up my license because of how the medications affected my focus and my ability to react quickly. So I had to stop driving. I eventually had to stop working. I was in too much pain, sitting all day. Like, I couldn't sit for long, but then I couldn't stand for long, and it hurt to lay down, and it hurt to move at all. It was super inflamed. Chronic pain was unbelievable. And just with the brain fog, I could barely remember what I had said 5 minutes prior in a conversation. So there was no way that I was going to be able to do, it was a lot of data entry, and I worked for a window and door company. And so we were responsible for going through surveyor reports, entering the information in the system to make sure the right products were ordered for the customer. And if I couldn't recall if I had done a task or not, I was going to become a liability at work. So I had to stop working. So that was by January of 2016. I couldn't work anymore, couldn't drive anymore, couldn't get out of the house on my own. We'd already traveled back to Canada a few times, and I had to be in a wheelchair just to get around. I couldn't walk on my own at all for more than maybe 20 feet without significant pain. And so that was my life. And I just thought, I had a thought around 2015. I don't know, flash, an insight of some kind. I just had this feeling like, okay, somehow this is going to be you. God's going to use this for good. I'm not sure how. I don't know when, but somehow he's going to use this for good. And that was another frustrating thing for me because I've been a faithful Christian since I was baptized in 1993. But during this phase, the brain fog was so bad, I could barely read a verse. I could barely, spend time in prayer without just completely forgetting what I just said. And so I felt like my relationship with God was definitely, obviously I understood he still loved me and that never changed. And I still believed, but I just felt like that connection was not there because the brain fog was just so bad. It was everything just to get up and get through my day. And that was something I had missed, that real connection with God, with other Christians. And that wasn't there for a long time. And yet somehow I kept thinking, this is going to be used for good. I wish I knew how. I mean, we all do, right? I was like, just, okay, God, show me how. Tell me right this minute. How's it going to work? I want to know. Nope, not telling you. I'll show you when the time is right. And that oddly happened in 2020. I had been put on statins in October of 2019. My triglycerides were through the roof. I had fatty liver disease and underactive thyroid at that point.
Okay, wait a minute. So, what were your triglyceride numbers at that time, if you remember? And one more thing, what was your dietary protocol from the time that you were going through 2014 up to 2020? What was your
Ah,
dietary protocol?
fair enough. So I ate this standard awful diet. I was bulimic for almost 30 years. And so there was a lot of binging and purging and restricting. Um, I would have days where I would try to eat as little as possible, which doesn't work well if you haven't nourished yourself with animal proteins and fats. And so by mid-afternoon, I figured I failed again. I gave up and I go in and I deserve a coffee with whipped cream on top. And I'm going to have a brownie because I didn't eat all morning. And so there was a lot of processed stuff. There was a lot of just high carbohydrate foods. I had no idea though. I mean, I grew up in a house where at young ages, I remember my mom saying, okay, guys, we're not having butter anymore. We got to eat margarine because butter's bad for us, right? Talking like early 80s. So margarine was in, butter was out. Lots of pasta and rice because that was healthy for us, right? It was the animal fats that were a danger because that's what the government told us and that's what doctors said. So why would we question it? So I ate a lot of that. I ate loads and loads and tons of fruits and vegetables between 2014 and 2020 because I thought it was healthy. I had no idea that it took a lipid specialist who I saw who put me on statins to say, by the way, the main reason why my triglycerides, and I don't remember the exact numbers other than it was 3 times above the advised levels. And the reason why was because I ate such a vast amount of fruits and vegetables that I now had the beginning of fatty liver disease. I'm like, oh, hang on a second. This can't be right. Really? But they're good for us. And she's like, well, no, you got to cut back on the fruit. Try to avoid the sugary treats. Once a week is fine. But, but beyond that, she had no other advice for me. And then, of course, the week after that appointment, we were in lockdown here in England for COVID. And we sort of went, well, we might die tomorrow, so let's eat what we like. Might as well. Why not? Now, my weight had already been creeping up since 2014. So I was probably sitting around 140 pounds at 5'5", which isn't the worst I've ever been, but it wasn't great. It was still a bit more for me than what I needed on my body. And by April of 2020, I was at about 225 pounds. Yeah. That's more than I ever weighed with both my pregnancies.
Okay, how long did it take for you to go from your weight creeping up to about 140 to 220?
So
How long was that span?
that happened. That was between 2015 and 2020. So initially it was just a little bit. And what I was doing, because I was still very bulimic, so it would sort of sit around 160. It went from 140 to 160 that first year, within the first 2 years of not being able to move. And gabapentin is also known for a side effect of causing weight gain. So that didn't help matters. But when I reached the point of a doctor finally acknowledging, oh, by the way, yeah, your thyroid is underperforming. You have an underactive thyroid. It took me years to get them to listen. So between 2019 and 2020, I went from 160 to 180. And then from March of, probably from February of 2020 up until May of 2020, I went from 180 to 225. And it just, everybody was eating takeout, everybody was having this, and this is the good thing, that's not the good thing. And we sort of reached a point of, well, everyone's, it's COVID. Who knows what's going to happen? So why worry about it? Let's eat what we feel like. And that was a lot of very rich, saucy, Indian takeaways and KFC and McDonald's delivered. So that was not helpful. And when we so come May, when we were getting a break, they're going to let us go out in public briefly. Okay. And so my husband and I were like, okay, we've both put on a bit of weight. Let's do this together. And so we first tried a paleo approach, which worked for him, made me worse because all the nuts and the seeds and the leafy greens made my IBS the worst it has ever been. He lost 13 pounds. I gained 8 in 2 weeks. Now, I think most of it was water weight, but I was so frustrated. I'm like, there's got to be something better. I remember my sister-in-law went keto to help with her psoriatic arthritis, and it really made a difference for her. So I thought, let me look up keto. What's involved, right? Looked at keto. I started keto briefly for a couple weeks, and I couldn't figure out why I was still feeling bloated and not feeling awesome. And so I watched a couple of Dr. Berry's videos where he talks about, hey, look, some people are okay with some plants, but if you have gut issues, if you have IBS, then you probably want to cut those out. And it was like, oh my gosh, I have permission. I have permission to cut out the fruits and vegetables. Let me try this. And that was it. That was the defining moment of, oh, now I feel better. And so within 6 months, I'd lost 100 pounds. Yeah. Everyone's like,
Okay, girl, I got to just stop you right here. Okay, so you listen to Dr. Berry, which I hope everyone does. He's just amazing. He simplifies everything. He just cuts through the noise and gives it to you like it is.
He does.
What was it that made you listen, and why did you feel as though you needed permission to cut those foods out?
I think it's because, again, that indoctrination we all get with, well, fruits and vegetables are good for you. So even though my initial reason for starting keto was because I wanted to lose the weight. I looked 7 months pregnant, and I definitely wasn't. And I was bloated, and the pain was beyond manageable. And I just felt awful. And I thought, if I could just lose a little bit of weight, maybe that will help with the pain. Maybe then my knees won't hurt so much. My joints won't be so achy. I had no idea that it would get rid of the brain fog and get me mobile and out of a wheelchair. But at that moment, I'm like, hey, if I can lose a little bit of weight, let's start with that. Because as an expert eating disorder person, I knew all about what I'd done but didn't actually work, the binging, the purging, and the restricting. And I thought, I got to try something different. And so I actually finally stopped and went, wait a minute. I have IBS. And why do I insist on eating the things that I know for a fact are triggering my symptoms? Right? It's like I had to get out of my own way and go, wait a minute, maybe God's got a better plan here. Always, of course, he has the better plan. But I had to get out of my own way and go, wait a minute. So some people, they do keto and they do absolutely brilliant on it. And that's great. And I'm not, it's not because I didn't like the fruits and vegetables. I love them, but I love them far too much. And they don't love me back. Plant material does not like me back. And that's fine. I will happily walk away. But yeah, it was that whole growing up of, you got to eat your fruits and vegetables because they're good for you because of the fiber and the vitamin C. And what I came to understand watching more of Dr. Berry's videos and others out in the space is like, well, wait a sec. If I'm not eating gobs and gobs of carbohydrates, I don't need all this vitamin C from fruits and vegetables, and I don't need the fiber. In fact, the fiber is the biggest reason my gut is so unhappy. If I cut all that out, I might actually start to feel way better. And so within the first month, I think I lost 30, 40 pounds, and my brain fog was almost completely gone. Just
amazing.
Everyone's like, how'd you do it? I'm like, I just ate meat and eggs. That's it. I ate bacon, eggs, red meat, some lamb, chicken, and occasional sausages. That's all I ate. That's it. Really? Yep.
So what was the date or the month that you started Carnivore, when you made that actual transition? And have you fell off the wagon at all or had any exceptions in your dietary protocol? And what do you typically eat in a day and how many times? And is your family on board? I know that's a mouthful.
No, that's absolutely fine. So I officially started Carnivore in the 1st of June, 2020. And for me, okay, so I saw Dr. Berry's videos, but I also, at the time, I know Joe Rogan was talking about going carnivore on his podcast and just clearing up his skin issues and things like that. So I just kind of went for it full throttle. It took me about a week to transition, but that was after the initial transition to paleo, which was, so I kind of gave up dairy and sugar with paleo. So that was the hardest part for me. It was like, holy jeepers. You don't realize how much sugar is in things until you try to avoid it. And then you see how much stuff is sweetened with sugar to some degree. So it took me about a week to adjust, and that really was not fun. But I just had to trust, God's got a plan for this. And you know what? I'm going to trust Dr. Berry. I don't know him. I've never met him, but he's a doctor. And I hear about all these success stories. And if I can just get through this first week, I'll be okay. And initially, I mean, my family was supportive. They thought I was a bit of a weirdo. But I'm like, that's okay. You guys eat whatever you like, but this is what I'm having. Because I'm determined to get healthy and take care of myself. And now that's like, oh, respect. So when I visited my younger son in Canada this summer, he's a chef, and he gets to bring home leftovers from work. He's like, hey, Mom, I brought you home some bacon. I'm like, awesome, bring it over. How'd you guess? Or he'd bring me home burger patties or some steak or what have you. And my husband is definitely keto, but, he looks to me as like, hey, so is this okay to eat? Is that okay to eat? I'm like, well, no, this isn't okay. This is a lower carb vegetable. Yes, you can have some berries. No, you probably shouldn't have that. But otherwise, it's like, hey, you're eating well. You're doing great. So they've been super supportive. I think the hardest thing for me was trying to realize when I was actually hungry versus eating out of anxiety or boredom. Because that was a huge thing for me, was eating even if I wasn't hungry. So I typically eat the same things every day, either sausages or some chicken breast or ground beef with egg yolks and lots of butter. And I just mix it all up, throw it into the frying pan. That's my favorite thing. When it's nice like this, my husband will say, hey, do you want steaks? I'll barbecue tonight. I'm like, awesome. Yes. I seem to do better with a higher fat carnivore diet. I think it's just really helped kind of regulate my hormones. So I've been off all my medications as of May the 1st last year. No pain meds, no statins, no thyroid medication, nothing. And the higher fat, just as I'm going through that fun time of menopause, yay. But it actually hasn't been too bad for me. It's been I say that now, yeah, you know, but it's actually been relatively okay for me. And I think a lot of that just because higher fat just helps with the hormones and keeping them healthy. And I've been known to, if I'm kind of hungry but not super hungry, I might have I'll cut off a slice of butter and I'll just snack on that from the fridge. Which my husband's like, I can't do that. I'm like, it's okay, you don't have to. I like it. I love the taste of salted butter. I know, weird, but that's how I know if I'm actually hungry or not. It's one of those, do I really want to stand up and cook right this minute? Because if I don't want to cook, I'm not that hungry. And then I might just be like, I could eat, but I'm not hungry, but I'm maybe. So I'll just cut off a little slap of butter. And if I'm still hungry after that, okay, fine. Get out the frying pan, make something to eat.
All right. So it sounds like you have your system down pat for yourself. Your tests are in place, your family's on board, everybody's supportive. So before we close out on this interview, Meghan, I'd like to know, what has your doctors shared, or are your doctors astonished at your progress? And I know that you were in a wheelchair, so tell us where you're at with your movement, if you're still in a wheelchair today. And I understand that you love coaching, so please talk about what prompted you to, become a certified health coach, and how do you help people today?
Oh, for sure. So, um, when I initially, okay, so I don't use a wheelchair anymore. I have not needed a wheelchair since October of last year, after 9 years. I'm actually in the process of trying to sell my Powerchair so somebody who legitimately needs it, it can go to a good home. But I actually walk several miles every single day. So I'm usually doing 4 to 7 miles on a daily basis. Not all consecutively, but I take our dogs out every morning and then I'll run errands into town and then I'll usually go for a walk again in the afternoon with my husband. So having that mobility back has been absolutely amazing, because if you'd asked me about it 10 years ago, I would have said it's not possible. There's absolutely no way I will ever be able to get out of the chair. So so that has been incredible. And last year when we came back, we went back to visit our son in Canada for 3 weeks last summer. And I started to think about, I'm healing, I'm feeling so much better. What do I want to do? And becoming a nutrition coach has appealed to me because I want to be able to share what I've been able to do, but also the possible healing other people can have with as many people as possible. And I think for me personally, I feel like it's a calling from God. And I also know that people don't necessarily want to get advice from you if you aren't certified. So I appreciate that. Yes, you might follow me on YouTube, you might like what I have to say on TikTok, but if I don't have certification behind me, why would you pay money to come talk to me? I get that. So I figure that's what led me back to going to school full-time last year, getting my certification. So I work with people, specifically people who want to follow an animal-based diet for health and healing, whether it's low carb, keto, or full carnivore. And I've helped people who follow all three of those types of programs. Just, I keep saying to them, look, it's not gonna make it any worse. What have you actually got to lose? Weight if you need to lose some, but beyond that, it may help you with just gut health or clearing up your skin. It could help you improve your mood. I've been off, I don't even take antidepressants anymore. I'm off my medications fully. And my crippling anxiety is occasional anxiety every now and again. Things go wrong, like being stuck in traffic today. that we can't get out of, but it doesn't cause me to go, I can't talk to anyone, I can't go outside, this is awful, oh my gosh, what do I do? It was just like, okay, this isn't great, I gotta trust it's gonna be okay. And coming to that place by getting rid of all the inflammation in my body, which is what Carnivore's brought me. Absolutely. And my GPs are kind of like, whatever you're doing, keep doing it.
Were
So
they even curious, girlfriend?
I
Please
had
tell me
one
that
of
they were
one of
curious.
the nurse practitioners was, when I went in for my annual checkup last year, she's like, oh yeah, I tried the keto thing before. Okay, good for you. And that's as far as it went, because no one wants to actually say, yes, this could actually be helpful to people. My GP certainly hasn't. But when I said, look, my bloods are healthy, they're in perfect range, I don't want to take a statin anymore. Okay, that's fine. You don't need to then.
Nice. I
So
love it.
it's their non-committed way of saying, this is good, but we can't officially promote it yet. But I hope that changes soon.
All right. So, Megan, I want to thank you first and foremost for joining me in this conversation and allowing me to get to know you and our audiences to get to know you as well. But I have a closing question, which is if there is somebody that is diagnosed with something, an autoimmune, with fibromyalgia, with Hashimoto's, anything that will shut them down and put them on the couch,
Hmm.
a woman that's 45, 50, 55, or even 60. They've tried everything, but they have a surplus amount of weight, they have brain fog, they have mental illness, they're just tired.
Hmm.
What would you say as a person, as a coach, as a neighbor to that person to help them to get up off the couch and try one more time?
I would probably start and say, look, I have lived that. I literally lived it for 10 years. And so I speak not out of judgment, but as someone who has lived through it. And you wouldn't believe how amazing you might feel just by changing your diet. Start slow. Cut out the processed sugars and the processed garbage first, and that alone will probably help improve things. After that, if you have to, lower your carbs. Start low carb, even start keto if you're not ready to jump into carnivores. But I would suggest that you want to phase up to carnivore, because that's what gave me the most healing. Do it for 60 days. You can do anything for 60 days. You don't have to worry about exercise. Don't stop taking your medications right away. See how you feel. Slowly transition to carnivore, and you could have amazing improvements. In fact, you could even completely heal from the condition. It is not a life sentence. Whatever they might say otherwise, it does not have to be a life sentence. God designed us to heal ourselves from almost everything, and if we nourish our bodies. And that's the thing I had to learn through much trial and much error. And that's what Carnivore has brought me. So it is exceptionally possible for anybody to see improvement just by changing your diet.
I couldn't agree with that more. Thank you so much for those words of wisdom, Miss Megan. And where can people find you on social media? I see that you're healingfoodscoach.com. Can they find you on all social media outlets as that, or do you go by another name as well?
I have two of them. So when I started my YouTube channel, that was from before. So it's Meghan the Faithful Fibromyalgia Warrior on YouTube. I'm on Instagram as the Faithful Fibromyalgia Warrior. You can also find me on TikTok as Healing Foods Coach 24, or you can go to my website at www.healingfoodscoach.com.
All
And
right.
respond to all comments and any questions. So
Thank you so much for your time today, Megan. Please stay on for one moment. All right, my friends. This is Rose AJ with another wonderful interview, a story of healing, the carnivore lifestyle, and with Miss Megan, who's a coach as well. So please reach out, support both our channels, and ask questions, whatever you need to do. But this interview, if any, can show, tell you guys that healing is possible, because when I post her picture on the thumbnail, it shows her from her largest size to her in a wheelchair to where she is today. So let's do it, team. We've got this. Love you guys to the core. Until next time. Bye.